Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, continuing my build, my reconstruction build, as it were, of the Estes Sentinel ATA missile. So I'm going to get started on the fins. Maybe we'll get to the motor mount, I don't know, but we'll see. In any event, this is going to be a bit of a learning experience for anybody who hasn't built an older kit. So this kit, as mentioned, it's vintage, right? It comes from the era before laser cut. So fortunately, I don't have to cut the fins out myself. That is a royal pain. They are die cut, but die cut is very, very different from the nice laser cutting that we're used to now. But regardless, the first step is still the same at any rate. I'm going to give this a quick sand, try to get rid of any particularly odious bits of irregularities in the fin. I'm not trying to make this actually smooth, just a good first step. Again, as I'm going, oh yeah, like right in here, this is really, I call it like furry. It's very uneven right in there. That's really the kind of thing I'm trying to sand off here rather than to get the whole thing nice and smooth. I'm just going to hit that spot in particular. Try to get it. It's better over here. This is actually, there's like a whole seam of it that seems to be running the whole way down the rocket, or the fin rather. Well, that's annoying. So let's focus on that a little bit more. This, by the way, is not something that is, a result of this being old or, like it wasn't more common in the past. It has nothing to do with the fact that it's die cut. It's just sometimes you get a piece of balsa and it has that, that's the word I'm looking for. The machining process, maybe when it was cut into strips, or it might have just been the way the plant grew, I don't know. But it's still something that crops up in balsa to this very day. So that's actually the purpose of this pre-sanding part, or sanding pre-everything else. Let's try to get rid of that to minimize it. There are still a couple spots in this that are a little on that fuzzy side, but they happen to be not in places that are part of fins. Like right here, that's well, the fin line runs right there, but there's a little spot here. I'm not going to worry about that. Alright, let's flip it over. Ooh, yeah, this is pretty rough on this side too, unfortunately. So rough that stuff is falling off my table and probably the camera is shaking. Yay! So, do your best. Now, this does have a crack in it. That's, well, that happens. Fortunately, it's not running through the fin. It's running along the cut. At least I'm pretty sure it is. Fingers crossed. Yeah, it is following the seam quite nicely, which is good. Because if that were running through a fin, that would be a problem. It's actually, both of these splits are right along part of the die cut. I'm just trying to find where the balsa is still pretty rough. Yeah, this particular piece of balsa was not a great piece of balsa. The other one actually is a whole lot nicer. So, again, this has nothing to do with the age of the kit. Or, okay, it's alright, that's starting to come apart. I need to be more cautious around it now because I don't want it snapping off in unpredictable ways. I'm going to try to hold it together and try to keep my sanding motion a little more compact here. Alright. Now, there's still some of that shagginess. It's probably the same seam right in here, so I'm just going to focus my sanding efforts right along that seam here for a moment. Still over here, making progress. Yeah, that's better. Still needs a little more though. This is still, I'm checking. If it were part of the scrap part, I wouldn't care. But unfortunately, it's not. It's in a fin. Alright. Feels pretty good. This is not part of the fin, so I'm not going to worry about that. Alright. Okay, now it is time for the part that is significantly less fun than previously indicated, and that is to cut these out. So, die casting is basically they took a big stamp and went stamp and punched a hole through some of the wood, but not all of it, as opposed to modern construction, which is laser cut, which they cut basically all of it except for a couple little burrs that are holding things together. Most of the time with this die cutting, there's one side that is way easier to see where all the cuts are than the other, and that happens to be this side. So this was probably like up when the machine stamped it. But still, this is not anywhere near as easy as modern fins to cut out. It's hard to see where you're going. You can kind of gently flex the wood to see where the cuts already are, because again, they go most of the way through, but not the whole way. And you are cutting, right? You're not just getting rid of a little burr. You are doing actual cutting. So you can definitely cut wrong here. So you need to go gently and slowly. And if it takes more than one pass, it takes more than one pass. Again, slow is the name of the game here. Now that was the easy cut because that was the one that was with the grain. I'm going to try to make all the with the grain cuts on all of these fins before I go do the harder ones. And that goes even farther. Okay. Alright, some of that's cut through. Alright, now the ones that are across the grain, yeah, that gets messy because across the grain is hard to keep the blade where it's supposed to be. Like I just completely went out of where the die part is, and I just did it again. Right? Fortunately, I was cutting into the scrap part of the wood, not the good part of the wood. That doesn't hurt anything. But if you end up, you got to be careful. That's really the bottom line. This is something I don't miss from the olden days. I've actually got, because this crack went right along one of the die imprints. Most of this is out already. And I just need to do a little bit of trim to get it free. There we go. So there's the first piece. And one of the drawbacks actually to doing the pre-cut sanding is it gets hard to see where you're supposed to be cutting. So that's unfortunately one of the reasons why you might have to flex the wood a little bit to see what you're supposed to be doing and where. Like this cut, this diagonal is really hard to see. And again, I want to go very slowly, and if it takes multiple passes, that's fine. I really don't want to cut this short. Like in the last fin, I missed a couple times actually, but it wasn't a problem because I was cutting into the scrap part of the wood, so it didn't hurt anything. But that's, there we go. You end up getting a less precise cut with die cut, which is why it's basically been phased out. It's probably cheaper to use it with a laser too, I would think. I don't know. That's just a guess. All right, so continuing on, where is the next cut? Now, there are, well, each of these sheets has 2 long ones and 2 short ones. And I can see the crack here. Crack actually doesn't go quite the whole length. That's where it ends. But that's mostly free. That's good. And then, okay. This is where the big with the grain cut starts, and I'm not really, yeah, wasn't going in the right place. Okay. Maybe I should just go the other direction. It might be easier to see it that way. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to stick the blade in above the ground, and that kind of forces it apart a little bit. Makes the cut easier to see the rest of the way. Okay. And there's a little diagonal bit here I need to trim off. Okay. Actually, that's not quite through either. There we go. And then, okay. There's a little bit there. Let's get this a little farther away. And then the last cut, I can see runs from right around here. Yeah, that's the cut. It's like, there we go. Okay. Last one, and this one's going to be, this one's going to be a little on the trickier side because again, it's very hard to see where that cut was. That's the easy one. Another that I can see reasonably well here. There we go, that's broken off. Let's see if I can't make this diagonal cut. Okay. I think that the corner here is probably still pretty well lodged in the wood, so I really don't want to force that. And then the last cut is this one. That sounded pretty promising. Still a little stuck up here. There we go. And then yeah, the tip here is not completely released. So I'll just check that. Okay. And there's a little burr that came along for the ride. We'll just chop that off. Alright, so yeah, so this process is obviously rather excruciating. Now, oh, there's a burr on that one too. Just trim that right off. Okay. Now, typically the end thing that you do once you get all the fins cut out, right, is you sand them off, and I'm usually just sanding them to get rid of the burrs. In this case, you definitely need to sand them because they're probably not going to be identical. They're going to be close, but not quite. So by sanding them together like this, you are going to knock off the rest, and it should be much closer to identical after you've done that. So, you know, this was an exciting throwback to be sure. I have to say I don't really miss this compared to laser cutting, but again, this was a great advent versus in the olden days. They gave you a piece of balsa wood and they gave you a template, and you had to cut the template out. So you had to like basically use your hobby knife and trace lines that were drawn on a piece of paper and make your fins that way. And I've done that a few times, my own design. It's not fun. This is a place where modern technology is super great because you could probably find somebody who has a laser cutter and would be happy to do this for you. I'm pretty sure there's one in my school, so that would be an option. There are also a couple people I know who have them. They're several $100s. I wouldn't go out and buy one just for funds, but if you're interested, that's an option. Anyway, I'm going to do the other fin off camera, and then I guess the next step will probably be to build the motor mount. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.